Welcome to the Palace of Westminster, the home of the UK Parliament. Oh, Kyagulanyi Sentamu Robert Bobi Wine. Akide tuteekamu mazoobewo. Hey, welcome to the ali mu Parliament ya Bungereza, UK Parliament. Aline Joel Senyonyi, aline Luwongo ya Lewis, Secretary General. Afala no kibayita okutta omuntu. Gwe Kyagulanyi ali mu Parliament ya Bungereza. Gwe Queen Elizabeth II mama nyabo. Abasajja bagenze nga abasaka kati bali mu Parliament. Ano General Museveni twafudera General Museveni yeekaabire mama nyabo. Gwe mai kino kye kiriwo bannange. Tulabe President Kyagulanyi ng'atugamba nti yagenze ku Bungereza ku mirimu emitongole, kumbe Parliament ya Bungereza yamuyise. Ne Joel Senyonyi ojukira Parliament ya Bungereza yayitedde Joel Senyonyi ng'amugamba nti musajja alwanyisiza nnyo enguzi bamwetaaga. Kati no baabano kyekyo maama yiyo tuli mu Parliament munda bali mu nteeseganya za kujjako General Museveni. This is a great win to us. Bananchuka buli ali gy'oli ng'oli munanchuka kubengalo. This is a win. Awo kyawedde Wangi mama nga mubadde mundabyeko ebigambo. President agambye fruitful engagement at the British Parliament yesterday, one step at a time. Yes, this is one step at a time. Yes, it's one step at a time. Mujjukira ntino Parliament ya Bungereza no yayagala dde okwegobako Nakyemale General Museveni naye nga baali tebannafuna ngeri Kyagulanyi gy'atuukamu Bungereza. Jjukira Kyagulanyi okuva lwe yajja yali akyaliko ban eby'emyaka 10 gye baali bamuteekako. Mbuno yalwanyise abali b'emutungo biina nga tabaagala. Okitegedde yagamba babatta babatte. Kati nga bamuteekako ban tagende Bungereza kuba Bungereza ali abali b'emutungo biina. Okitegedde kati ban yaggwako mu mwaka ki 2023 ndoza ban lwe yaggwako si kyekyo 2023 ban lwe yaggwako nirabidde mu mwaka 2024 ndoza ban lwe yaggwako Kyagulanyi n'addamu okkirizibwa ogende Bungereza. Kati within a short period of time engagements zizze zibeerawo ez'okujjako Nakyemalira Museveni. Jjukira mwaka gwa 2 yali 2019 awo Parliament ya Bungereza yakwata nnyo omuliro Kyagulanyi we yajjira nga wulira bamuyinamu ennyonta baagala agendeyo baagala ajjeko Nakyemalira General Museveni natengeteeka terinamukkiriza kuddayo ne basobirwa ne basaba omupiira bo ne bagwekubira nga mu Parliament ya Bungereza. Era emyaka egyo gyonna bazze nga bateesa ku kimu Uganda ne Kyagulanyi Sentamu nti tuggyeko tutya obukulembeze obwa Nakyemalira obuluddeko ebbanga eddene ntaako omwana wattu Kyagulanyi Sentamu. Njagala nkuwa akatambi kano omanyi Parliament ya Bungereza yeesazeewo eyagala muntu omu Kyagulanyi nga yali mu ntebe General Museveni ayitawo agerwa kitula yeebake. Wulira.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg to move that this House has considered democracy in Uganda. Serious concerns have been raised internationally about the Ugandan government systematically undermining democracy in their country. MPs have been arrested, institutions that should protect the democratic rights of citizens are being weakened, and the voices of ordinary Ugandans are being ignored. The United Kingdom is a friend of Uganda. We are important partners in trade, in development, in security. And, Madam Chair, I am a friend of Uganda too. Uganda and the UK have a shared past, and I hope we will have a strong and prosperous shared future together too. But at the start of this debate today, it's important to ask, what is the UK's interest in Uganda, and whether that gives us a legitimate right to make any comment about its democracy? I firmly believe that Uganda should be valued as an equal partner to the UK. But it hasn't always been an equal partnership. Our relationship began in 1894. Until 1962, Uganda was what was known then as a British protectorate. Now, Uganda is an independent, sovereign nation, and it has been throughout my lifetime. It has a constitution that describes a balance of power between an executive, a legislature and other independent bodies. I respect the Ugandan constitution. It's right for Uganda and it's right for the Ugandan people. That constitution protects the Ugandan people. It's the rock on which Ugandan democracy is built. And the relationship between our two countries should always respect the Ugandan constitution. I will give way, certainly.
He's making some very good points. I wonder whether he has seen the press coverage in Uganda of this debate that is taking place, which has approached the whole of the subject from a position of saying, why is the British Parliament trying to tell us what to do? We're in our own parliament. What gives them the right to do that? Does that not show that we have an uphill struggle to get our points across in the sort of measured way he's describing? And how will we do that?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and it's precisely why, having seen that press coverage, I thought it was right to ask the question about what our legitimate interest is and to establish why our relationship is important and how Ugandan democracy impacts on that relationship. And hopefully, as I make progress, I'll develop that argument. So the relationship that we have is one where we work together. We've worked together to respond to the refugee crisis in South Sudan. It's a relationship where we trade with each other. And it's a relationship where the UK provides development assistance to the people of Uganda. In these areas, we have shared goals and shared interests as countries. But I also have a personal interest in Uganda. I moved to Uganda in 2006, and I spent more than 4 years living and working in a rural part of the country, in Kanungu district, next to the fantastically named Bwindi impenetrable forest. I worked as a doctor with local health workers and the local community to transform a small health centre into a fantastic, thriving hospital and community health programme. I did this as a VSO volunteer without pay and paid my small part to use my skills to leave a sustainable healthcare system. And in case anyone from outside, and I'm sure there will be a few people watching from outside, is wondering, I don't continue to have any stake in Uganda. I have no financial interests or otherwise. But I am a friend of the country, and I have many Ugandan friends. And I want to speak today in that spirit of friendship and as an equal partner. Living for a long time in a different culture gives you particular insight. I learned, although not very well, to speak some of the language, Runyankoli Ruchiga. I learned a lot about local cultures and beliefs, and I saw many of the successes of President Museveni's NRM government. I saw significant efforts to improve education, the ambitious programme of universal education. That's really positive. I saw economic growth, albeit in a country with significant inequalities. Ugandans are slowly getting richer. That's a good thing too. I saw growth in infrastructure, the remarkable spread of mobile phones, improvements to road networks, improvements to power. These should help the future economy to grow and everyone to become more prosperous. But I also saw things that didn't work well. The government-run health service didn't work well in the area that I lived in. It failed to get the basics right. Health worker morale was low and absenteeism extremely high. There was a centrally run system to supply drugs, but a combination of underfunding, theft and bad planning meant supplies often ran out. And because people had little confidence in the institutions of government to deliver the health care they needed, they had to take matters into their own hands. Patients went to private drug shops, health workers took second jobs, and the poorest people got left behind, not getting care and suffering devastating consequences. Now, the failure of the Ugandan health service isn't because of the people. There are many fantastic, talented Ugandan health workers. It's because of the system. It's a system reliant on patronage, sadly riddled with corruption, and with centralised decision-making that leads to paralysis. And whilst living in the country, I also got to witness how the political process works. At a local level, I was introduced to GISOs, Government Internal Security Officers, living in every community. Now, ostensibly, they're there to collect evidence of people trying to destabilise the country. But in practice, that extends to any act of political opposition to the president. Alongside every local council leader sits a resident district commissioner, or RDC, the president's own appointed person who monitors everything happening in that district. It's done in the name of security, but again, RDCs are used to gather intelligence and to stop political dissent. I learned that the Internal Security Organisation is there to protect the President. Legitimate criticism of the policies of the President have been deliberately conflated with criticism of the state. The state has become personalised. Ugandans see this system for themselves. They don't need me to point it out. For some people, they know no different. President Museveni has been in power for 33 years this month. 3/4 of people in the country haven't ever lived under a different leader.
Yes.
The Ugandan people can see that the institutions of their democracy are slowly being eroded. Firstly, the government has closed down critical media outlets. There are credible reports that television stations were interrupted during the 2016 elections when results were being reported that favoured the opposition. There are also credible reports that social media, including Facebook and Twitter, is shut down by the government during sensitive times. Secondly, the government has used the military to attack Parliament. When MPs were debating the extension of presidential term limits, Parliament was attacked and MPs, including Betty Nambuze, were beaten by armed forces.
Newano, jukira newano jo, babade bateesa ku ttaka ku mwanyi, hands off our coffee, ojukira bajjako amasannyalaze mu parliament ne bijja ne bikuba ababaka ba parliament ne bagamba make sure those Baganda don't get the numbers. Hey, gwe abasajja baba balaba nga tebagoberera Kyagulanyi gyali eri mu kinyusi kyennyini onompulirira embaga.
Betty Nambuze were beaten by armed forces. Thirdly, there's evidence of serious human rights abuses. There are serious and credible reports about an attack in Kasese on the palace of King Charles Mubere in 2016 and the massacre of 150 civilians by Ugandan forces. According to these reports, the soldier who led this attack has been promoted. No independent investigation has taken place.
Yes.
Hopefully the Minister will give the government's position on this attack. Fourthly, elections have been described in diplomatic language as being short of being free and fair. Serious allegations have been made about the conduct of elections in Uganda over many years, but the most recent EU report on the 2016 presidential election made 30 recommendations that should be enacted before the next election, which happens in 2021. They include taking clear steps to differentiate the state from the ruling party, steps to strengthen the independence of the Electoral Commission, and systematic checks on the integrity of votes. As of March 2018, none of these EU recommendations have been implemented. There are credible stories of vote rigging, with the police preventing access to these rigging houses, and electoral bribery is common.
Ojjukira jo mu kalulu k'ekawempe North bayota Nammere Lopu Joro Ssennyonyi jagezi ne SG David Subongoya badi bagenza okulaba ababbirayo obulu basanze ba RDC ne bali mu kubiteekinga nga bajjako n'amapolisi ku mmotoka ekyo tekikomanga kikyaliwo oshegedde batekawo ebifo ebyenjawulo gye babbira obululu olaba ne mu parliament ya Bungereza bwe kituukayo nti bateekawo ennyumba z'enjawulo nga zakubbiramu bululu ne bapolitikinga nga bagenda buteeka mu box ku makya naye bw'ogezaako kugendayo mulabe why are you doing this, they prevent you ne bakuba n'okukuba byonna omusajja abidocumentinga gwe abasajja batulimu nga ntunuka gye n'omuseveni ku luno.
Routinely hand out money or gifts at election rallies. Now, the interference in elections doesn't just happen on the day of an election. I have friends who've stood for elected office in Uganda. They're subjected to constant low-level intimidation. Police or soldiers are stationed outside their home and they're followed. After they've visited a village to talk with people, soldiers go to that village and threaten people with reprisals if they vote against the government. Radio stations, the main source of media in most rural areas, are owned by government-backed politicians and they report clearly biased information. And perhaps most disturbingly of all, people engaging with politics are subjected to arbitrary arrest and detention. The institutions that are supposed to protect democracy, the police and the military, are used to undermine it. Finally, the Public Order Management Bill, passed in 2013, has further diminished the political space. Police approval is required if 3 or more people want to gather to discuss political issues. What kind of democracy curtails politics in this way? Now, there are many Ugandan opposition politicians who've struggled bravely to use the democratic process to win power. There isn't time to mention all of them here, but I'd like to draw attention to 2 people. Kizza Besigye has stood for president on 3 occasions. He's been arrested, beaten and harassed so many times that he's lost count. I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Besigye when he visited our parliament last year. His sacrifices in the pursuit of democracy in Uganda should be lauded. And I also want to mention Robert Kyagulanyi, also known as Bobi Wine. Kyagulanyi is a young, charismatic musician with a large popular following who was elected to the Ugandan parliament around the same time that I was elected to the UK parliament. But while I get to, in a friendly way, be critical of the government without harassment, Bobi has been the target of totally undemocratic behaviour by his. In August of last year, he and 4 other MPs were arrested by the military whilst campaigning at a by-election. His driver was shot dead. He was severely beaten by soldiers before being brought to court on trumped-up charges that were later dropped. Bobi Wine was eventually handed over to police and released. But this is just another example of the Ugandan government using the military to prevent democratically elected politicians doing their job. So why are all of these attacks on democracy important? Well, they're important for the Ugandan people, the people who might want to one day see a different government in their country.
Yes.
They have no hope of ever seeing a different government if this one undermines democracy to cling on to power. They're important because of international standards and accountability. Uganda is a partner to our country in the United Nations, in the Commonwealth, and we have multilateral relationships through the European Union. Partners hold each other to international standards. They're also important because they undermine the ability of the UK and the Ugandan people to work together on shared goals. The attacks on democracy allow a small group of people to retain power.
Yes.
A group of people who are illegally benefiting from that power and patronage. This corruption has meant that the UK's Department for International Development has had to stop direct budget support to the government of Uganda. In 2012, €12 million was channelled from aid budgets from Ireland, Denmark and Norway, and directly into the bank account of officials working in the Prime Minister's office.
Ooh.
We now have to provide our UK support through private sector organisations and non-governmental organisations. We can't pretend this is a good thing. It's always better to work with governments. But, and let's be honest here, we know that if we really want to help the people of Uganda, we can't give money to the current government. Transparency International ranks Uganda as 151st out of 180 countries in the world for corruption. I'll certainly give way, yes.
Thank you very much. I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. When I worked in Uganda, and I was working in aid there, we actually ensured that the aid got to the people by delivering it ourselves and refusing it to give it to any officials and taking it direct to the villages or the people that required it. I know that's very difficult, but I'm quite sure the Honourable Gentleman will agree with me.
Well, I think it's a terrible state of affairs because, of course, if we want development to be sustainable, then sustainable development is much more likely to happen through a democratically elected government and through building the institutions within a country. But there are people who are so desperate that they still need aid, and you can't trust government to give that aid. So I thank you for highlighting that point. So Transparency International ranks Uganda as 151st out of 180 countries in the world. That's worse than Kenya, which is at 143, much worse than Tanzania at 107, and Ethiopia at 103, and Rwanda is ranked as high as 48. In 2013, Transparency International said, corruption in Uganda is widespread and seen as one of the greatest obstacles to the country's economic development, as well as to the provision of excellent quality public services. Such corruption challenges are exacerbated by weak law enforcement, which fuels a culture of impunity, particularly with regards to high-ranking officials involved in corruption schemes. But as well as undermining our shared development objectives, The attacks on democracy are also important because Britain wants to provide military support to the country of Uganda. We want to see Uganda have secure borders, and we want to see Uganda contribute to peace in Somalia. But we can't do that unless we have confidence in Uganda's democracy and the rule of law. So when there are questions about the Ugandan army's use of cluster bombs in South Sudan, when the army is being used to enter parliament, when the army allegedly massacres people in Kasese, when special forces are being used to hunt down and arrest politicians campaigning in a by-election, I'd like to ask the Minister, how can we be sure that the people we are training are only engaging in peacekeeping activities? Certainly.
And I very much welcome what he says and thank him for bringing this issue before the House. But would he also pay great tribute to those Ugandan soldiers who have given their lives in Mogadishu and wider Somalia in the cause of peacekeeping? These are very, very brave men and women who have done that in the cause of bringing peace to that country.
Now, olaba ne waberayo ebisajja bya Museveni ate Museveni awo yali yabakwatirawo abazungu okitegedde nti yeteekawo nga Savior wa Africa nti buli kizibu ekiri mu Africa yalina okisolovinga yalina man power okitegedde yefuula US mu Africa okitegedde nti ye buli ggwanga erimu obutabanguko yalina okuba ne solution. Yali Mogadishu, yali South Sudan, yali Congo, yali Kenya, yali buli wamu, yali Rwanda, yali buli wamu yaliyo. Okitegedde yefuula naggwano kati n'alimba abazungu abo n'ababika akatambala ku mutwe ku maaso kati bo ne bamulabisangaye ekyokuzanyisaye ekyokubayambako okitegedde okumuyisaamu ebyabwe ebigendererwa byabwe bituukiza mu Africa kyekintu kyebateekamu naye tukyalina okusitukira ddala okwongera okumulabisa okitegedde omulabi omwami asituse n'ayogera muno tusiime n'abasirikale ba Uganda bagenda ne bafiire Mogadishu. Why should they die from there? Why?
Thank the honourable gentleman for raising that, and I join him in paying real tribute to all of the East African peacekeeping forces who are working in Somalia and working in the peacekeeping mission there. But we need to know that the UK isn't enabling the atrocities that are being committed also within the country of Uganda by Ugandan forces. Of course, that would never be our intention, and I'm sure it would be argued that our training of military forces helps them to become more professional and to meet international standards. But when a soldier is given orders from the top, they have to follow these orders. When the Ugandan government is deliberately using the military to undermine democracy, it's right that the UK looks very carefully at our involvement. Before he became president, Yoweri Museveni published a book called What is Africa's Problem? In it, he said, the problem of Africa in general, and Uganda in particular, is not the people, but leaders who want to overstay in power. Now, I want to see Uganda where it would be possible, should the Ugandan people want a change of government, for them to achieve a change of government through democratic means. But opposition politicians find themselves in an impossible position. It's really hard to build good policies and get widespread support for them when the democratic space is being so curtailed. Between now and the next election in 2021, it's crucial that a united opposition build a potentially winning manifesto with popular policies. It's crucial that opposition politicians are allowed to freely campaign and enthuse the people of Uganda. It's crucial that the opposition are given an equal chance to try to persuade people that they have an alternative platform for government on a level playing field. But there isn't a level playing field because so many profoundly undemocratic occurrences have become normalised in Uganda. It's just not acceptable in a democracy for the military to arrest, beat and torture opposition politicians. It's not acceptable in a democracy for soldiers to enter Parliament and use physical force against MPs. It's not acceptable in a democracy for elections to be rigged. Uganda's democracy is under threat. The institutions that in a normal democracy would have the power to hold a government to account have been systematically undermined, intimidated, bullied and cajoled by the government. Let nobody be fooled. Uganda has a military government in civilian clothes.
Yes.
Now, as a friend to the Ugandan people, how can the UK best help support their democracy? Well, we're already supporting good governance and anti-corruption initiatives through our Department for International Development, and I'm sure the Minister will talk more about that. But when there's a systematic undermining of democratic institutions, is that enough? Now, Ugandan opposition leaders are asking the UK government to place targeted sanctions on Uganda. They're asking us to freeze the assets of Ugandan officials who are known for violations of human rights abuses. They're asking us to enforce a travel ban on Uganda's leaders who are known for corruption and violation of human rights. And they're asking for Britain to condemn in the strongest terms the attacks and the abuse of Ugandan parliamentarians and all the activists inside and outside of Uganda. I'd like to give the Minister the opportunity today to respond to these requests. Now, I personally don't necessarily believe that all of these things are needed. I certainly wouldn't want to do anything that would put at risk our relationship with the people of Uganda. And I think sanctions would be a very last resort. But I do understand why people are calling for them. And I do say that unless significant change happens in Uganda, the UK should take no option off the table. Now, I want to end by speaking directly to the people of Uganda, some of whom are here today watching. We want the UK to work with you on security, sustainable development and on business growth. But we are watching your government closely. Our support for your government comes with conditions. Members of Parliament, like myself and colleagues here today, will ask our government to invest in your country if we see a thriving democracy and international standards being met. And the United Kingdom needs to be on the side of the Ugandan people here. Democracy, the means by which we debate and create laws, is a process that requires the diligent engagement of its citizens. Democracy fails when the people aren't able to criticise their leaders, or they don't feel confident that they can throw them out of office if they're not doing a good job. A healthy democracy can unlock so much potential in a country, but right now the hopes of the Ugandan people are not being met by the people who govern them. And that's why I say to the Ugandan people, whether you're in this chamber here in London or watching on the screen of your phone in Kampala, I'm with you and we're with you. We're watching and we're hoping for a brighter future for the Ugandan people. There are Democrats across the world who know that it's possible and offer our solidarity to you in your fight for a Uganda governed by and in the interests of the Ugandan people. A Uganda guided by the unrestricted voices of its people. We're with you, because that's what a truly democratic Uganda could be. Prosperous, peaceful and secure. And if you work for it, and if your institutions are protected and defended, then there's nothing that can stand in the way of the millions of you who are desperate for change. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered democracy in Uganda. Pauline Layton.
Mrs. Donna. And it's very good to serve under your chairmanship. I think this is probably the first time, even in 8 years, that I've served under your chairmanship. So it's good to take part in this debate. And I don't disagree with a word that, and I have to say, my honourable friend opposite says, because he has lived there, he's been steeped in the culture there, he knows exactly what happens over there. And I also am a friend of Uganda. I haven't lived there, but
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable member, but there is a division going on now.
is it just one vote, do you know?
If there is one vote, we will suspend for 15 minutes. If there are 2 votes, we will suspend for 30 minutes, I think. 25 minutes, I'm sure. So 15 minutes, 1 vote, 25 minutes if there are 2 votes. Oh, I think it's fine to leave your belongings here. Everything will be looked.
Otegede oyo gwe bayita Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine amaanyi ge. Otegede Paalamenti ya Bungereza gyali naye Paalamenti eyo okumuyita ne Ropijoro Ssenyonyi baalabanga abasajja bano balina ekyenjawulo. Okitegedde balina ekintu ekibalimu mu kulwanyisa Nakyemaya n'okutereeza Uganda eno ne bagamba tubeetaaga. Okitegedde tubeetaaga tubalabeko wano mu ggwanga lino, twogereko mu Paalamenti ya Bungereza, twogereko nabo ebigambo. Okitegedde ku mbeera eri mu Uganda, obuli bw'enguzi. Mujjukira Paalamenti yateeka sanctions ku Anita Amongi ne banne wakulyanguzi tetuzamuywa amaso kuba mabati ge Kalamoja ne basajja ba Museveni bangi bataddeko lwa pressure Kyagulanyi gyataddeko mu ggwanga lino. Jukira mabega yonna gye Museveni abadde yeerimbise nga ayina Abongereza eno nga yo tewali amunyegako tewali aginyeenyaako kubanga Kyagulanyi atakkizibwa kugendayo. Naye nga Zinsinda atunyeenya naye nga Bungereza kagumba kakonge ka ku kkubo kano infiltration of Kyagulanyi n'ayingira mu Paalamenti ya Bungereza ebigambo n'abibagamba ne batuuka n'okwetera Joel Ssennyonyi nti Joel yajja asooka atugambe ku bigambo okitegedde atubuulire omwana oyo akoze bulungi nnyo mu Uganda eyo engeri gyakulamu gyatembeetamu ensonga n'okulwanyisa obuli bw'enguzi nga bawulira baagala agendeyo boogeremukko naye ababuulire kyekituufu ddala ekiri mu Paalamenti ye Uganda kyekirina okukolebwa okulaba nga bajjako Nakyemalira General Museveni bulijjo nno weebiri kaakati abasajja baabayise bali nabo boogera bigambo bagamba twagala okulaba nga General Museveni oyo avuddeko kitegedde twagala okulaba nga Uganda eteredde twagala okulaba Bannayuganda nga beyagalira mu nsi yaabwe okitegedde nga Bannayuganda bassa kimu Bannayuganda bafuna obukulembeze obupya ne bajjako obukadde ne bateekako obupya ne balabe ku gavumenti empya n'essi bino ebiriwo okubonyaabonyezebwa ate gavumenti erina okubakuuma aye ne babonyaabonya okitegedde kati Paalamenti ya Bungereza kyeriko era kye yeetaaga okulaba ensonga lwaki bayise President Kyagulanyi ensonga lwaki bayise Joel Ssennyonyi ensonga lwaki bayise Lewis Lubongoya babeere mu Paalamenti ya Bungereza ebigambo babigambe era ebigambo babigambye nawo General Museveni waatudde munywanyi gamubugumye eno bulo nnene eri ku mutima ate esiiwa yoli sheekanako bwe nanje Musemba kali Bobi Wine aje basimbye bwe welcome the palace of Westminster the home of the UK Parliament obungamba kilala ki tuba tuli awo bano tuba bawedi